Hi, I'm Jessica, and when I'm not drinking all the coffee, watching Razorback sports, or hanging out with my family of boys, it's my passion to help elementary music teachers just like you find your unique teaching style. My goal with this podcast is to share helpful tips, strategies, and to give you the motivation you need to gain momentum in your teaching so you can continue being the music teacher rock star you already are. Welcome to episode 18. Today we are going to talk all about how to teach your elementary students how to write music in your classroom. If you're anything like me, when you think of composing music or you even hear the words compose music, you immediately think of writing a 4-part score or a piano sonata or an orchestra score, or you think of the classical composers of our time. Now, here's the thing. Composing music in elementary music is not as complicated as you might think it is. Now, think back to when you first started teaching, or if you're listening to this and you're still in college or you're a brand new music teacher, these may be the thoughts you're having right now. You've looked at the objectives you're supposed to teach your students, and you look at the section that says compose music, and you're going, right, so I don't know the first thing about how to do that. That is exactly where I was. When I taught at my first school that hadn't had music for 7 years, I was like, yeah, right. I'm supposed to teach these kids how to write music? There's no way. They haven't even ever sang a song in a music room before. And so I'm going to break it down and teach you the simplest ways you can begin to teach your students how to compose music. All right, let's go ahead and dive right in. First thing I want to tell you is don't be intimidated by the word compose. The word compose, if you look it up, just Google the word compose, and not just in relation to music, but just the word in general. Compose means to create. And if you think about it in that way, think about creating music in the classroom. There are so many ways the kids are creating music. You may not even realize through various activities you're doing, you are already having them compose music. Different ways of doing this is, let's say you're playing a 4-beat rhythm. And then you say, I'm going to play a 4-beat rhythm, and then I want you to make up your own 4-beat rhythm by improvising. That is creating/composing music. Yes, even just that little bit of having them perform a 4-beat rhythm, just improvising it off the top of their head, not even writing the notes down that they're playing, is composing music. Yes, it is. So when you think about it like that, you're like, okay, well, I am doing some of that. I'm already doing some of that. Yes, you are, and that is composing music. But here are some ways to build on that. If you're anything like I was, and you maybe don't have a lot of instruments, then have the students do body percussion. Now, the fun thing about improvising is when you tell your students to improvise a rhythm, and maybe the A section is something you all play some body percussion together, and then the B section is everybody improvises. To anybody walking by your classroom, it will sound like a hot mess, but as the music teacher, you know that when things sound like a hot mess, it's usually because you're creating music, right? You're practicing something, they're practicing on their instrument, or you're improvising something. And so it's going to sound messy because it's supposed to. And what's really cool is, so let's say the B section is 16 beats long and your students are improvising just by patting their legs or clapping. You'll get to beats 13, 14, 15, 16, and you all go back to the A rhythm together. And it just sounds really cool when everybody comes back together. So improvising is the first step of composing or creating music. Now, the next thing I want to tell you that you can do is that you can, with your upper elementary, you can always do a class project. And I'm actually also linking to a blog post where I wrote about how to help your upper elementary students compose music. So you can read all about that, and it gives you a lot more steps. But I want to just mention that a really fun activity to do with upper elementary is to have like a composition project. And then you can even have them perform it for each other, for maybe for the school. Maybe that is their program that year. And so there's different ways to go about doing this. The first thing you would do is pick a theme, as each class gets to pick their own theme. Then you talk about the number of beats you would like them to create. You can have them created in small groups or as a whole class. And then it's up to you if you want them to write words or just write a rhythm down, or maybe they don't write anything down and it's all like an improvising project where they're just composing music by just creating it. But it's totally up to the teacher. When you feel like they're comfortable enough when they're improvising and they're creating rhythms, then you can maybe have them notate it. And a fun way to do that is just to get, like you can buy large dry erase boards and cut them into squares. Or there's even places that sell just square-sized dry erase boards, and give every child that, and they can just start creating, like writing rhythms down by creating them, or use popsicle sticks even to create rhythms on the floor. And then once their small group or class has different rhythms, then you start getting the ideas from each student. Okay, what rhythm do we want to put here? What rhythm do we want in this measure? And you just start slowly creating it. This may take a couple months. And then you decide, do we want to leave this as just a rhythm composition, or do we want to turn it into some kind of a melody? Do we want to add words or just leave it musical? All of that is up to you. It's as simple or complicated as you want to make it. So that's the next point I want to make, is to remember that composing music doesn't have to include words. If you think of today, in today's society, when we think of songwriting, everything nowadays is all about writing words and then probably putting just some kind of track to it, right? There are still some amazing musicians out there who write quality music to go along with their songs. But songwriting today, when the kids come into your classroom, that's what they're used to. You say songwriting, they're immediately like, okay, give me a pencil, let me jot down some words. No, start with creating rhythms first, melody, then maybe write it down, but definitely improvise first, then write it down. Then you could add words if you want to, but like I said, you do not have to. The next thing I want to point out is, if you don't have technology, but you want your kids to start writing melodies and rhythms, then like I said, using small dry erase boards or even giving them a piece of staff paper to write it down is perfectly fine. Then, if you do have technology, you may have a smart board in your classroom, or you may have a couple student computers or tablets. Then there are so many, and I'm not going to go through them in this podcast episode, but there's so many apps out there today, or composition websites where your students, even Finale, where your students can create compositions. So they've either created it, wrote it down, then they can choose what instruments they want to, and make it like a class project, like I said. They can start adding it to technology. And that's totally up to you if you want to do that part and go that far. But that's a great way. I know one of the teaching objectives is using technology. So you're doing composing in technology in one unit. And then, so the last thing I want to say is, after they've done all that, then you can transfer it. After they've figured out what instruments they want to play with, then you transfer their compositions to instruments. And maybe it's like, if you did small groups, then one of them's doing on the drum, one child is playing the rhythm sticks, one child has a melodic instrument, maybe someone's playing on the recorder, and they decide ahead of time who's playing what. Are they all playing the same melody/rhythm together? Or did they make it like a little more difficult with two parts? Like I said, it's totally up to you. If all of this completely overwhelms you, let's go back to my first point. Compose means to create. Just start creating music with your kids. Don't just teach them to sing and to do movement, but also have them create music. Or if you're just having them improvise music or working in small groups to make up rhythms together, that is composing. You guys, I am so passionate about talking about this topic. So make sure you check out that blog post where I give some details about how to really include composition in your classroom. All right, you guys have an amazing day and keep creating music with your students. And I cannot wait to talk to you soon. All right, bye. Thank you so much for listening in to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, I would love for you to review the show and leave a rating on iTunes. To find out more about how I can help you gain momentum in your elementary music teaching career, head to thedomesticmusician.com, where you'll find free downloads, courses, the blog, and so much more. Continue teaching music and never doubt the impact you're making each and every day in the lives of your students.